right.
Whew.
Welcome to RAM Symposium, everyone. This hour we feature Discovering the National Science Foundation. I'm Lauren Lucio and I'll be moderating this session. Please note that today's presentation is being recorded. This presentation will last about 60 minutes. All participants online are currently muted. During interactive portions, you can unmute yourself and use the video as you feel comfortable. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll monitor the chat box throughout the presentation. Closed captioning is available under the Teams options menu. Please make note of the evaluation survey link that I'll post in the chat and be sure to complete that survey at the end of today's presentation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters for today, Shannon Irie, OSP Training and Information Coordinator, and Lisa Anaya, Director of Research Administration for the College of Natural Sciences.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, have we met before?
We have a couple of times.
Maybe.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today for a presentation about discovering the National Science Foundation. I believe that a lot of times people think that the National Science Foundation, and when we talk about our proposals going in and awards coming in, that these are kind of our plain Jane type things. But the science that comes out of the things that we do are not plain Jane at all. They're highly innovative. They're collaborative. They're very exciting. But what makes it seem like it's plain Jane is that the National Science Foundation, in my opinion, is the gold standard for explanations on how proposals need to go in, for how the award documents then come into our sponsored programs, because they have research terms and conditions that have been vetted and they're very standardized. And then also at the award stage, they have very good information out there and they give us great information of how to manage our awards. So I'm not going to say that they're plain Jane. It's just they're really good at communicating, and I hope that comes through in our presentation today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first slide, and Lisa, you jump in anytime, but I always like to put the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just in beginning the presentation, we want this to be just casual. You know, we're going to have a conversation today about NSF. So we'll go through these slides, but definitely if you have comments and interactions, things to contribute, please chime in. Yeah, absolutely. The NSF mission, I would agree that it's important because everything is filtered through that mission statement. That is the types of research they're interested in, and not everybody's research may be a fit. So just saying that almost has a disclaimer. There's tons of other federal agencies, but NSF is very specific about what they are willing to fund and again further their mission, which is there on the screen. To promote the progress of science, to advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense and for other purposes. So they're very vast and broad, I would say, in what they fund and we're able to propose. And from our roles in sponsor programs, a short bit ago, all of the units that we supported proposed to National Science Foundation, and that was vast and wide.
I find it funny that the mission statement, if you see, this is the same mission statement they've had since 1950. So
Right.
that's it's pretty amazing. And again, they are very consistent. Yes. And, you know, that's great, especially in our world, especially with research administration on that side, but even on the faculty side. I mean, it's really nice that they have these consistent policies. You know what to expect. You're not going into the wild, wild west with NSF because they're very good about giving us the information up front and what they're expecting.
Absolutely. The changes they make, they also communicate very well, and we'll go over some of that a little later.
Yeah. And so NSF is an independent federal agency. They are not one of the departments of Health and Human Sciences. They're not the Department of Defense. They're not the Department of education, but they are their own independent agency. So them and NASA are kind of our two larger sponsors that are independent agencies. They support basic STEM disciplines, and they are organized in a very specific way. And let's go to this slide. So they have 8 NSF directorates. So they have these large directorates that have specific programs that they run underneath them, and they have then your directorate, your division, and then a program within those. Each of these, and I pulled up some statistics because it's really actually pretty fascinating. They all operate fairly independently of each other. They're all appropriated their own budgets, and the total NSF budget that they just requested, by the way, was 10.5 billion for fiscal year 23. Now, it hasn't been appropriated yet, but that is what the request is. In 2022, they had a budget of $8.8 billion totally. NSF reaches all 50 states through grants to nearly 2,000 colleges, universities, and institutions. And each year, NSF receives more than 40,000 competitive proposals and makes about 11,000 new awards. So I did the math. So that means that the success rate for proposals is about 27.5%. But
good.
that's actually pretty good comparatively, right?
Comparatively, other agencies usually have about, and are at about the 10% payout line, and that's steady over years and years. So I believe NSF's one of the few that actually progress in the number of awards that they are able to fund.
Yeah, and some divisions and some programs, it's those success rates vary depending on, but upon where you're at.
Asterisk disclaimer, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, absolutely. Of the doctorates, of the 8, that clearly they cover basically hard sciences. There are some social sciences in there. But as we mentioned earlier, it's that flavor of NSF. This is their mission. This is what they focus on. And this is primarily their expertise.
In the last couple of years, the last one, the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships, known as TIP, was added recently. So they're actually a newer addition. Yeah, all I can see, well, it's interesting. I figured it out, presentation mode in here with the owl, et cetera. So I did print it out, but I have lots of other notes that I've been writing on here. So NSF, their general guidance is, again, the gold standard, in my opinion. It's the PAP guide, which is the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide. They make changes to this about every 12 to 24 months. Sometimes those changes are pretty minimal, but a lot of times the changes that they make are pretty substantial. And we're going to talk about those because coming FY23 calendar year, January, there are some actual very significant changes that are coming to the PAP guide. So anything else you want to add to the PAP guide?
No, it's again, just reiterating that they are the gold standard. They are very clear in their expectations, both on the proposal side and the award side. And when there's a discrepancy, they elicit feedback, they take it to heart, and they rewrite these policies, addressing the concerns of the research population, what's been submitted. And again, that's why they're doing it so often, because they upgrade and they want the best product out there that streamlines, that funds, and essentially, again, meeting their mission goal to make the world a better place. So, and it's funny that it's little things like these changes, and what does that have to do with the biosketch? What does that have to do? But all things intricately connected, and it matters. And again, they set the standard.
They will put all these changes out months before anything ever happens for the next time period. And in the resources for this presentation, by the way, I have these YouTube Tuesdays held by Jean Feldman, who is the head of, and I wrote her title. Oh yeah, I did, because it's huge. Okay. Jean Feldman is the head policy office, Division of Institution and Award Support within NSF's Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management.
Wow. How
What
big
are-
is her card, right?
Yeah, her business card is huge. It's got two sides.
She hands out, what do you call them? The little recipe cards, right? The note sheet.
So she has a lot of these YouTube Tuesdays that are, and I have on the resources, there's links to that. And she went through and pretty much went through every single change that they're proposing for the PAP guide. They've already gone through lots of discussions about this already, and they've had feedback for months and months on this. So there's a lot coming up. But before we go into the changes, I want to say that for the proposals, NSS has many different ways of putting proposals out there or requesting for proposals or inviting people for proposals. One of them is that we have these program descriptions. That is by each of those divisions. They might have just rolling target dates or an open submission date. And generally those are then just use the PAP guide as their submission guidelines. But then there's also program solicitations, and those are going to be specific to something that NSF is asking for specific work for. Also in these divisions, in the directorates, the divisions or the programs. And a lot of times the proposal instructions will supersede PAP guides. So there'll be additional instructions on how to apply to those type of grants, cooperative agreements. But then they also have a thing called Dear Colleague letters. And
Yes.
Dear Colleague letters have always flummoxed me. I didn't understand why they were or how they were, but really these are some of these earmarked funds of little special projects that special groups or the Senate or Congress have requested. And they put these out as these Dear Colleague letters. Sometimes they'll have specific other instructions, but a lot of times they also just follow the PAP guide.
Yeah,
So anyways, I just wanted to kind of throw that out as a pre-award thing before we go into, because I wanted to talk about some of these upcoming PAP guide changes in 2023. And I'm not gonna read all these to you. I'm just gonna
let's talk about the big ones.
yeah, let's
shall
talk
we?
about the big ones. Fastlane. Fastlane's going away. So if you haven't heard it already, Fastlane is not going to be around any longer.
Gonna leave the building.
Yeah, there might be a couple of functions that are still going to have to hang on past 2023, January 2023, such as they talked about maybe possibly review, maybe. So when you're asked to be a reviewer on a proposal as a faculty member, may still have to go into Fastlane to do some of those functions. But largely, we're waiting for it actually for any time now that Fastlane is going to be decommissioned. Right now, we still have to do like some postdoc fellowship proposals through Fastlane, some supplements. If the original proposal was done in Fastlane, you have to do the supplement still in Fastlane. SBIR proposals, and I think that's about it. And they're working very hard to get those moved over to research.gov as well. And we should be hearing about that soon. One of the other big ones is that NSF has started and has never done this before, but they're now doing broad agency announcements. This has started now. That isn't necessarily with the PAP guide, but they made all these announcements along with the PAP guide. And along with that, there's a new system that is called BAM, which is the Broad Agency Announcement Management Site. There was just an NSF Engines proposal that went through, and they had to put these proposals into this BAM system. I am curious in the audience, virtual, did anyone have to go into the system at all? Anyone in the?
I didn't go in the system, but there was a lot of chatter on the res admin listserv about complications that people were running into while they were uploading documents and things.
Yeah, I saw the same thing on the res admin. I didn't go through and look at all the whole line of it, but I would be intrigued. And if anyone out in virtual world either has worked in the BAM or does work in the BAM anytime soon, please contact me. I'd really like to know how this goes. But then one of the other ones is another system that they are putting out there. It's called the Prospect Tool. And that's if you have any of the, like a Rapid, an Eager, a Raise, a Goalie, all of those little niche proposals that NSF does, you now have to put them through this prospect tool. It used to be that you'd send an email to a program manager and then they would get back to you whether or not you could submit. Now it has to go through this prospect tool and they will get back to people and let them know whether they can move forward with those proposals. So you can't just put them in the system. Now you have to go through this prospect tool first. So that was a big one. Let's
Was
see.
that just to provide a more formal ask of sorts?
From what I watched from Gene Feldman, it was because they're trying to get more data and they weren't getting good data by people sending emails directly to their program manager. So this prospect tool is going to give them the data about how many people are requesting to do these kind of things.
Right.
So it's all about data, right? They need to know how many people are using the systems. In my opinion, one of the biggest changes to the PAP guide coming up is that Science CV is going to be mandatory. NSF is no longer going to be allowing their fillable templates to be used. Basically, they said it's because so many people are trying to modify those templates when they're uploading them into research.gov. And so it's causing a lot of validation errors that they said they're just getting rid of them. So whether you use the templates now or Science CV, once you have the information in those forms, you're not allowed to change them after they're uploaded. You're not like a Science CV form, you're not allowed to then do a PDF edit on it. There's coding on the back of those PDF forms. So as soon as you edit something in there, it changes it and then the system won't recognize it any longer. But there's also a lot of new things coming down the pike with the with Science CV and just bio sketches and current pendings in general. The current pending, they're going to have an attestation on the current pending that the faculty member or the PI and co-PIs are going to have to attest to that the information is accurate. So that's going to be new. And there's a lot of talk. The Office of Science, Tech and Technology Policy, OSTP, which has a representative from almost all the sponsors, the federal sponsors. They're trying to get together and trying to talk about harmonizing a lot of these type of forms across all the sponsors. So currently in Science CV, NSF is the big user, NIH, DOE, and I think it's the Department of Ed, possibly. But they're talking about trying to harmonize some of these because of administrative burden and just to make it easier. I mean, how silly is it that we have to create a brand new this for every single thing for all the federal funding? Whether it happens or not, I don't know, but it would be the hope.
One can.
One can.
One must.
Yeah. So anyways, the others are some more niche-y things. There's some more forms that might be mandatory depending on the program that you select, but I would still really suggest going out and watching Gene Feldman's videos. They're great.
Yeah, absolutely. And when are these changes occurring?
January 2023.
So I think the takeaway from that is, and we've been broadcasting back to our faculty, right? Get on Science CV. It's a little bit of work up front, but those that finally give in and lean in, putting all their information in, they really like it. And it does quicken that part and piece for each of their submissions, especially when they're very active researchers, that those formats can be tailored by the system itself for DOE, for NSF, for whomever, whatever, as well as easily tracking the current impendings and their statuses as they move from anticipated or pending to active or haven't received a decision, you know. So again, once they're on board, but getting them on board. So there's your challenge between now and January, since it will be mandated.
Yep. And there are trainings on campus for Science CV, and I would recommend them for not only people who are going to be PIs or co-PIs or key people, but also for the research administrators who help them, because there is a tool that you can become a delegate so that you can at least help get some of this information into the system. So so the next slide, we're just going to, the NSF ERA system. We talked about Fastlane
We did, didn't we?
going
Did we
away.
cover this already?
We did. Well, it's going away, but I'm just, again, 2 new systems coming on, the BAM and the prospect tool. So look for those, for things that are coming out, and don't be surprised that they're, that you might have to use a different system than what you're used to.
So again, planning early, planning ahead, reading your solicitation, understanding, knowing what the requirement will be, so it's not a last minute scramble and you're trying to log in or function in a new system that you may not have had a prior experience, nor us. BAM is new to everybody.
We do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Please.
Someone is wondering where they can find information for the Science CV trainings on campus.
Well, I should know that because I do them. We don't actually have any currently set up. We're looking at getting some trainings set up for November and December. And so that will go out on Ramaround. But if someone has a specific unit that they would like to possibly set something up, let's say you have a lot of people that would like to get together in your particular unit, shoot me an email. And my information will be out with all these handouts, et cetera. So
There was a previous blast, and it's been a while, that was sent with some instructions on step by step how to do it. So I think following this, we can add it to our chat and get it to our participants.
yeah, we do have a step by step. And there was also a blog that I put out in July. So
I'll put that information.
yep. So go,
Very good.
we'll add that to our information when we send this out. Okay.
Cool. So, changes and CAPCA changes, we're through that. So let's talk a little bit about NSF and the way they function. So, current slide is about deciphering the application and the grant numbers, reaching back to those doctorals, if you kind of can envision that. It's part of the award piece, and granted, current awards, you'll see it on older awards. Current awards, it's fallen off. It's actually text within the body of the award. But the application number, it can be broke down that the first immediate in this instance is the 18. So that's equaling your the year of award. And following that, prior to that, as I said, it was the designation of the division that was awarding that. However, like so you will only see that on older awards. Now it's just a number. And if you're super savvy, you submit, you'll receive your confirmation, and it'll be proposal ID number. BAM. If funded, that number now stays. It remains. Or it would change in process. So.
Well, in some of these applications, they don't change very often. So for instance, if you still have an 18 in front of some of these solicitations or applications, it's because that's really the last time they made any significant changes to it.
They will typically run 2-3 years, and
some of them even longer.
Even longer, yeah. So if there's not a change to the program into any of the specifics and not the submission instructions, then yeah, that could be longstanding. I wonder what the longest one is. That'd be fun trivia.
Well, I did
know.
we're going to look at a couple of examples here. So, and I did pull up the most recent numbers on these. So while we talked about NSF being pretty, in their lane as far as proposals and everything, but so we pulled up some funding opportunity examples that are just a little bit different because they have some more limitations or they have other things that are expected of us. And the first one is the the faculty early career development program. And this one has some limitations because PIs have to be in a specific part of their career. They have to be tenure track faculty, and they are only allowed to submit 3 of these submissions in their lifetime.
Right.
So it makes it a little bit interesting. So you have to really be watching these. And career especially encourages women, members of underrepresented minority groups, and persons with disabilities to apply. So, and then, so it's a really cool program that they have, but again, you have to watch the limitations as far as who's eligible on those.
Absolutely, it's highly competitive.
Mhm.
Just side notes, we CSU, specifically the Research Acceleration Office, does host a workshop or these early candidate faculty to help them develop their proposals and put forth their best possible products. So
And we do have links to the RAO office in the resource slide, and they do have some really great grant writing and other types of development programs available.
good stuff, and even more so is the PECAS. Career in itself is prestigious, but tacking on the presidential early piece,
Mhm.
even more so. And again, limited to certain individuals meeting those criteria, those qualifications.
So the next one I threw up there is the REU, which is the research experience for undergraduates. And again, if you notice that solicitation number says 19-582, so they haven't changed this in quite a while. So I would expect there's probably gonna be some changes coming up soon. But a lot of times, these are put in as supplements. And it has to be for 10 or more undergraduates to be associated with a specific research project where they will work closely with faculty and researchers. RU students are selected by the institution, not NSF. They can be funded as independent proposals or a supplement to an existing program, but these almost always come over as participant support.
Always.
Always.
And back to that 19-582, that's usually because they're upping the stipend levels within, the dollar amounts that are available to extend to the students. The solicitation, the writing itself hasn't changed much. With RUs, you can either, as mentioned here, you can either propose as a RU site, and that's where the 10 or more undergraduates part and piece comes in, or you can do it as a supplement, which would then support 1, 2, 3 individual students that qualify to learn that research experience. And it's the student that's benefiting. And we say that specifically because it's part of that participant support definition that they're qualifying for that stipend because they're the one benefiting. We are essentially carving out an ability for their time to expand their education and their knowledge base. So they, although working on a federal project awarded to Colorado State University, it is by their benefit. They are not contributing in that capacity to the award itself, which would normally be one of our other earning types, an employment type.
Yeah.
That's the word.
And I will say that NSF, again, gold standard for writing out what participant support is.
Absolutely.
And we have another session I'll talk about starting at 2:15 that talks about participant support and incentive payments if people are interested.
Shameless plug, but
But they also have a new participant support form out. It's an interactive form, and I also have the resource on here, and it kind of leads you, is this participant support? Because a lot of times, you're in the middle of doing a budget or looking at going, is this? I don't know if it is. Again, the PAP guide and this new form that they have out there, NSF is great. They just have that information and have it in a really friendly way.
So again, these are just a small handful of the opportunities that are out there.
MRI, we haven't even.
Oh, we didn't touch MRI. So
it's the last one.
Major Research Instrument Program. It's actually a limited submission program because they limit, what's it, 2?
3.
Three,
Three
excuse
per
me.
organization.
Stand corrected. And I think it's actually specific what it is. It's acquisition or what's the other one? So anyway.
Building,
Build,
like you can build fabrication.
yeah. So how many can go in from an institution? And so this opportunity, it follows our limited submission process, which again, RAO heads, and then they make that determination, which is our best foot forward as an organization. So, but again, requirements under the program, there's cost share involved. It's simply acquiring a major instrument that would promote and fund, would promote and what's the word I need? Serve the research on campus in a broad way. So it's not an instrument that would just plug into somebody's lab per se. It's something with a much broader use and expansive across campus.
Yeah, there's this expectation that that instrumentation will then also be available to other NSF funded projects, and not just at our institution, by the way. There is this expectation that that instrumentation will then be used on larger. Out at the department that I used to work at, they built and I'm sorry if anyone from Atmos is on the call, the radome, or it's a radar under one of these MRI grants, and currently getting ready for that to be used by several different institutions, and so it's out there for use for other people. So that's the main reason why they do this. But cost share is a big factor on this, which cost share is not usually something that NSF requires at all. Mandatory is very, very limited to very select programs like this, and voluntary is not allowed at NSF. So we never want to add any voluntary cost share to our proposals because they don't allow it. Okay, so proposal types. Again, pretty standard. When you go into research.gov, you have these possibilities. I'd say the major one that we go to is full proposal. And under full proposals, there's a whole slew of different types in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, some of the opportunities, they may ask for a letter of intent, and it's typically just evaluating for their panels. How many may be applying to this? How many people do we need on the review side? Very, very rarely, not very rarely, but not, never say never, never say always. Is it an encourage or a encourage, discourage, as I think they're wording, but those do exist as well, and that comes from the letter of intent, which then progresses through, and some do have the letter of intent, a preliminary proposal, and then finally full proposal, which each step covers different portions of the submission. So and then renewal and accomplishment-based renewal, very specific, and that's not only very specific, but only to NSF. Their determination of that. In general, most things are new proposals, classified as new proposals under the NSF world.
Yeah, and under those new proposals, you have, your equipment, your conference workshop, just a standard research project, postdoc fellowships, SBIR, but also those eager, raise, and goalie ones that we were just talking about that have to go through that prospector tool first. Fun.
Questions? We're kind of scooting along, but like I said, we definitely want to be interactive and sharing your thoughts and ideas and experiences.
Yeah.
All right, rolling.
Okay. Well,
Budgets.
pre-award. What? Where's NSF weird?
The 2-month rule.
The 2-month rule. NSF's the only sponsor that I know of that has this type of a rule on there, and it's basically that your PI, co-PI, key personnel can only have 2 months of NSF support budgeted.
And actually 2 months of support from all NSF.
From all NSFs that they have. So if you're currently funded with NSF and you have 2 months of support that you have budgeted, then you have to request, put additional justifications if you're going to put in another month or another half month or quarter month, whatever it is. And that has to then be allowed in the award document. Specifically.
Yes.
Now, in post-award, though, strangely enough, under our normal rebudgeting authority, we can actually take more than 2 months on all the NSF. But what they're looking at is the budget. What we have budgeted, what we say in our budgets that we're going to do. But again, in post-award, you are allowed to take more than 2 months of NSF time if it's necessary. And it is progressing the scope of work. I'm not saying that we just put time on because we put time on, but because it's necessary. And sometimes that happens. Let's say you budgeted for a postdoc or a research scientist that you were going to hire and then you never found them.
Right.
Well, sometimes those that part of that scope of work sometimes then falls on one of those key personnel.
And interestingly enough, you key personnel, you can add effort, as Shannon said, but you cannot reduce it.
No.
There is a rule that says you can reduce your effort by 25% of your proposed effort. So if you're at 1 month or half a month, that becomes a very small amount that you have fluctuation with prior to needing to go back to NSF for a prior approval for more than the 25% allotted.
So I guess just in summary, if you want more than 2 months and you're a co-PI or PI, you can request it. You have to put it in the justification and then it has to be put in the award documents.
Right. And we see that on occasion with what we call kind of soft funded researchers in the departments, research scientists, research scholars that they need to bring in external funding to receive their salaries. So. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. What would you recommend if their pending support is more than 2 months? So I feel like I have people approaching that.
So I had an instance where we had things that were pending and unbeknownst to us, they had decided that they were going to fund one of those pendings and we hadn't gotten word for it. So we had put in 2 proposals with more time on it. The program manager came back and we had to rebudget those 2 proposed. So if the pending is truly pending and they don't know if it's going to be awarded, you can ask for more. But they may come back, the program manager, and say, okay, so since you've put this in, you've been awarded X amount, you now have too much in this budget and you're going to have to do some rebudgeting. So I had to put in 2 new budgets based upon this one proposal that did end up getting funded. So it does happen.
Yeah.
So it's cumulative then across the proposals?
It's cumulative across all funded projects and then the one you're putting in, right?
And it's within a CSU fiscal year.
Yeah, it's within the fiscal year. But it gets kind of funky because some proposals obviously they're not funded on fiscal year. So sometimes it's hard to figure out. It really is, especially with people if they do a lot of NSF and have a lot of NSF funding. So, yeah.
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, NSF has required us to designate what our year is.
Yeah.
The CSU as an institution has designated our fiscal year, so July through June. On those current and pendings, that's when we're adding them 2002, 2022, 23, 24, 25. That's what that's based on.
Okay. So moving along to just, and we're just putting these out there for the participant support and cost share. Again, NSF is really great about telling us what participant support is. They've given us tools. The PAP guide is very clear about what is participant support and what is not participant support.
But there's always a question.
Yeah.
So when there is, read through, reach out to, your lead research administration and of course OSB for clarifications.
Because there are also it depends categories under
Yes.
participant support.
Inevitably, there's always gray,
There's always some gray in there as well, and
typically meals.
meals or materials and supplies sometimes. So you
Mhm.
can sometimes for conference stuff, put in some materials and supplies. But again, in order for those to truly be participant support costs, they have to come in the award that way. So we can't just add them in and just say, oh, we're in the middle of a conference and we want to buy some paper to, so people can make planes at their table and fly them at each other.
Yeah.
We can't do that. That other category under participant support, we're not allowed to transfer costs into that
Yeah.
without getting it in the award document.
Exactly. And participant support costs are highly restrictive.
Yep.
At CSU, we will set up a separate child account for those costs.
Yep.
Monies can flow from the main account into participant support. in case you have an overage and you need to cover those expenses. However, they cannot go in the other directions. It's a one-way street. To have them leave that participant support cost category and float back to the main account for other budgeting purposes, it requires prior NSF approval.
And again, we don't really need to cover cost share because we already talked about it. One, they don't allow voluntary and only specific programs at NSF require it. So
Exactly. And if it's there, there's a space on the budget form and that's where it would land, and it would also show up on the award side as an approved expenditure.
so required docs at proposal, and by the way, not all these are required. I don't know who put together this PowerPoint.
No,
Who was that?
for me, but I don't know who it was.
It was me. Anyways, some of these are required. So we have a whole category called senior proposal documentation that's needed for all the senior co-PIs. And one of those is this collaborators and other affiliations. And also the biosketch and the current pending are all required documentation for any senior PI, co-PI, key personnel. And the collaborators and other affiliations is literally just used for them to get reviewers. They need to know where your conflicts of interest are. They need to know if they put this out for review, is there going to be a problem? So other required docs, the postdoc mentoring plan, it is required if you have a postdoc on your proposal. Letters of collaboration are not required. I don't know why they're under there.
No, unless specifically requested.
And they have to have specific language.
Exactly, which NSF gives.
Yeah.
Because they're so thorough.
They are so thorough. They'll even give you a little paragraph of what it fill in the blank.
Sign it, put it on your letterhead. Anything else will not do.
We do not like it. They do not want rah-rah letters. They don't want say, oh, this is the best proposal ever. You need to fund it. They don't want those. So actual required docs of proposal are things like, your summary, your project narrative, data management plan, facilities, equipment, and other resources. These are required along with those senior personnel documentation.
And of course, most of the documents have page limitations. There are specific fonts and sizes and whatnots and to be followed to make the documents compliant.
They have a checklist, right?
Yep, that's my next one.
All right.
You
I like it.
knew. So on these required documentation, there's a lot of overlap between sometimes your current and pending, your biosketch, and facilities, equipment, and other resources. So they have this great matrix out there. And again, we have the resource on there so that you can go and grab it that tells you in this instance, this is where it would go. It'll go on your biosketch. This one should be on your current and pending. This you should list in the facilities, equipment, and other resources. It also, this matrix also tells you in post-award, some of this documentation also needs to be done in post-award. NSF is also going to be requesting our current pending before we make award now. When you do annual reports, when you do final reports. So that current pending is going to actually be kind of this living document for NSF because they're very interested to make sure that you don't have a lot of conflicts of commitment. And they're going to be looking for conflicts of interest on your biosketch. So this matrix is great. I would suggest going and grabbing it. It has lots of different scenarios in there. A lot of times people will ask, I have startup funds. Do I need to list that on my current and pending? And the answer to that is no, you do not. So, and it gives that in here. So it goes through these scenarios. I have a postdoc and I'm mentoring that person. Where do I put that? Well, it's on here. It's on this matrix. So it's a really great, again, NSF gives us great information.
So it's good for us as the reviewers and supports to our faculty, but it's very much aimed at them in their creation and the writing of the documents.
That's in their guide, right? It's all in their guide.
The matrix is not in the PAP guide. It's an outside, but I have the resource on the slides that you'll get.
Okay.
So there's a link to it. Yeah, and also to the participant support tool that they have. It's an interactive tool. I have the link to that as well. Yeah. So when the proposal goes in, and I'll have Lisa, because she's done millions of these, CSU has to give NSF a lot of assurances before we submit this proposal.
And so we're certifying to, again, we've reviewed, we can attest that there's no conflict of interest. The information is true and correct to our knowledge, that we have the correct policies, procedures in place for regulatory requirements, animal care, human subjects. What else we have here? It just kind of goes on and on and on, and you literally scroll
Mhm.
2, potentially 3 times before you can click the button that says, I agree, accept, click and submit. So it's just ensuring which CSU as an R1 school, we have all of that in place. It's not something we need to think about on a per submission basis, because it's all of those requirements. Requirements have been instituted, but we are held to them. We attest, we commit, and that's, we conduct our research according to them.
And this is the main reason why proposals go in from the institution and not from the PIs, is because the PIs don't have these things behind them. CSU has these things behind them, and we are attesting and making sure that we have the internal controls available to meet what our federal sponsors, and sometimes not just federal sponsors, sometimes we have other sponsors that want the same ones. I'm just going to point out one thing on this first slide, is that Rcr training is one of the things that we are attesting that we have. And currently for NSF, only graduate students and doctoral researchers have to have Rcr training for NSF. But there is talk, and they're kicking the tires on faculty needing to have Rcr training as well.
PIs.
That's the PIs that they're talking about it. It is not currently a condition for NSF funding. It's only graduate students and postdoctoral and postdocs. But unlike NIH, that does require Rcr training for PIs and for anyone who touches the grants. NSF hasn't, but they're talking about it. So just something that might be coming down the pike. More assurances. We have to certify about dual use of research.
Exactly, which falls within the
Concerns?
control
Yeah.
realm, and simple fork, it's used for one thing, but can it be used for maybe
Something nefarious.
nefarious and evil, maybe?
Yeah.
Could be, but again, we're certifying that we're doing due diligence, that we are following up with our research. We understand the proposed use and expectation, and if there's anything that would even be questionable or of risk, then technology control plans will be assessed internally, and the research will be followed to ensure compliance.
Yeah, even something as simple as a GPS can be considered to be a dual use of concern. Because GPS can not only be used for, on a map and in our car that gets us from place to place, but GPS can be used as a military military usages. So there are some things that we don't even think about, but CSU has your back.
Radar.
Yeah. So just kind of highlights of proposals. NSF is really concerned about intellectual merit and broader impacts. You find that in several of the areas of the proposal, from the summary to the project narrative sections. And it's also what NSF uses to review proposals. Those are their 2 main criteria for that. So there's not a lot here. And also that NSF is also gold standard for collaborative proposals. Absolutely the best, that you can have 2 institutions working simultaneously on the same proposal and not having to overlap documentation and submitting them together. It's absolutely wonderful. And then they get their funding separately and have their own awards. Absolutely the best system that I've seen so far. Those grant.gov packages, when you're doing like any other sponsor, where you're having to do the entire proposal you know, in duplication and sending it out. NSF does not. Generally, NSF in the past hasn't had a lot of subawards because they prefer this collaborative proposal, but seeing more and more subawards on some of the solicitations. So,
And again, per program, sometimes collaborative is not allowable and several words are the only mechanism to bring in
Yep.
A collaborating institution.
so there is that in research.gov, it's one of the first things you have to select when you're going in to select what kind of a proposal you got.
So,
Merit.
the target dates, the.
Oh, sorry, I went straight through.
Target date, receipt date. Again, we mentioned earlier that some of these doctorals are now having these rolling deadlines. Computer science, we love them, right, Amanda?
Mhm.
Yeah, they're just in perpetual, I'll submit someday, is what it feels like, but it's allowing the researchers much more flexibility. They're not huge deadlines where every reviewer in the country is bound to review 200 proposals in one sitting. So it seems to be working. Again, NSF getting good feedback about it, and it's been welcomed. There's probably an expectation that more and more of these programs will begin using these rolling targeted deadlines as opposed to the hard recipient dates.
Yep.
What other fun stuff? And you can read slides, but is there?
But in the next one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I went to the merit review. Sorry, I'm up
You're ahead
above
of
you.
me?
I'm ahead of you.
see?
I know. Sorry.
Who actually then makes the decision on the award of the NSF grant?
So it goes to the merit review. So you put in your proposal. That's our first green line, right? Is, you know, that's the proposal submission. It then goes to reviewers. It does take a little bit for the reviewers to get there because they, and there's usually a lapse in that time period before the reviewers get it. The program officer actually will then get the review recommendations, and the program officer will then say, this is what I want to fund. And then it will go to the director of that division to actually make the actual awards. And all of this merit review takes at least 6 months. And NSF is pretty right on target with 6 months, about right at 6 months. You'll hear pretty close to that, whether or not a proposal was accepted or not. But then after you then hear that you're going to get it, then it takes at least another 30 days, sometimes more these days. Everybody's down in people for it to go through their contracting office and to get the award to CSU. So.
Address your question.
Yep. So again, scoring is pretty simplistic. Again, you know, excellent, very good, good, fair, poor.
Yeah. And NSF is, I think, dare I say, the only agency that will allow a PI to suggest reviewers or don't include. So again,
Yep.
they're using current dependent, excuse me, the COA document, they're using the material there within, but it's the only agency that actually gives you a field to upload the information to provide knowledgeable reviewers, reviewers you may, they may or may not have had conflict with in the past, might be their competitors, so to speak. That would be a natural selection as a reviewer, but they're like, no, based on conflict or whatever. They're again, NSF's the only agency that I'm aware of that I can recall that provides that as an option. So it's the one advantage, maybe leg up that a researcher would have if they would use that. It's optional, both fields being optional, but why wouldn't you, right?
Sure.
Slip an ace in the deck, why not?
We have another question
Mhm.
in the chat. For NSF awards and all other awards, do funds actually have to be physically at CSU before they can be spent on, or can accounts be spent on once they are set up, but award distribution is still pending?
We're coming to our prior approvals next.
We're gonna talk about that soon.
Because that's the next one. So, and again, scoring is here. Pretty simplistic, but let's go to prior approvals since we just had a question. So NSF and some of our other sponsors do allow for 90-day pre-spending. It is waived for NSF. So if you know you're going to be awarded, we have at CSU, it's called an at-risk form that you can fill out, and you can get a 5-3 number set up before the funds get here. The only thing about that is you got to remember is that sometimes those awards don't always come in with the exact date that you thought that they were going to. So if you put in, if you put a cost on that 5-3 and it's 91 days, you're going to have to move something. So that's why it's called an at-risk form, is because yes, we're really pretty sure this is coming in. We got the, I call them the warm fuzzy from the sponsor. But again, it's going to be at your risk, and your department's going to have to give us an account just in case. So other prior approvals, we put down here whether it's waived, which means that you can do it, or it's required that you have to get a prior approval here. We don't need to belabor that, but what I wanted to show you guys is that all of these prior approvals, the best place to look at this, and it's other sponsors as well, by the way, NSF, DOE, NIH, USDA, NIFA, and NASA, and there's a couple of others on here. We have the prior approval matrix website. We have that in the resource document as well, how to get to that. But these are the research terms and conditions, and it will tell you whether you need to ask for prior approval to do something or if it's something that you can do without it. This is a really handy document to have. They don't change it very often. The last change was 2020, November 2020.
Yeah, and these prior approvals are based on uniform guidance, post-award activities out of uniform guidance. Each agency, and hence the columns, whether or not it's waived or a requirement, each agency has that ability to fluctuate and have some difference from the set guidance. Jumping back to the question, I don't think we addressed it, so let me try. So in addition to 90-day pre-award spending, the actual funding never comes to CSU.
Yep.
It's a cost reimbursable award. We are authorized up to the ceiling amount, whatever that amount of the award is. So we spend salaries, travel, whatnot in support of the project as proposed. And on a monthly basis, we draw from the federal government to reimburse our costs, those expenses.
So we don't ever get the physical funds until we've actually spent them.
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
I'm going to go through this really quickly. This is just kind of my plug because NSF is also talking a lot about this. Reporting is becoming a real big issue. A lot of people are not submitting their reports on time. NSF's reporting timelines are 90 days for the annual progress report, and it is due 90 days before the end of the current budget period. Anything past that, it is considered late. And then it's 120 days for the final technical progress report and the outcomes report from the senior personnel. So what happens if you don't submit your reports? Does anyone have any clue? Here we go. FAPIS. This is our new federal award. It's not new. I shouldn't say that. This has been around, I think, since 2015. But FAPIS, our sponsors have to submit suspension debarment information, and we have to supply that information, but they also have to supply on this system, the sponsors do, material failures to comply. And not doing your reporting, and they give one whole annual, and by the way, I'm not telling people that they can submit their reports a year later. It's still considered late. But if you do not submit that report and it's over a year later, CSU ends up on the FAPIS with a material failure to comply with terms and conditions. And this can affect awards for everybody across campus, because our sponsors also have to do risk assessments on us before they give us awards. Just like when we do a sub award, our sponsors have to do the same thing with us. And one of the where areas that they go to is FAPIS, and they look to see if we have any dings on our, because that's going to tell them that we don't have internal controls here at CSU and we're not doing the job that we're supposed to be doing. So that's my,
With the annual reports, NSF uses that carrot. They will withhold processing any other requests, so changing PIs or moving around those participant support dollars if need be. They won't act until those progress reports are in the annual progress reports. And the kicker is, as we do so much collaborative research when there are co-PIs and the other key personnel, if you are associated with an award, but yet you are delinquent on another award, they will hold you in contempt until you, that key personnel on the other award, becomes compliant. So it's their one, really more like a stick. I don't know if it's a carrot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's their one mechanism that they use to ensure that we follow. I mean, we're really good about spending the money, right? So let's be good about doing the reports too.
yeah. And they are talking about not allowing people who have outstanding reports that are late, not on the FAPIS report, but actually late, past that 120 or 90 days, not to even be able to put a proposal in. So.
Right.
How do we as the institution ensure that the reports are submitted on time?
Sonia, that is a great question. Sonia's question, by the way, if you couldn't hear over there, since we're here, is how do we as an institution? That's a good question. It's something that we need to be really starting to look at. So I don't have the answer to it. Okay. Well, guys, we're at time. We're actually a little past time. Thank you for joining us. If you guys have questions after the fact, please shoot them to Lisa or myself. You can also just put them on the chat for this meeting. We will see it even after the meeting closes. So
Thank you for your
great.
time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's an attendance roster up there if you'd like to.
Oh, yes, and the attendance. Please sign the attendance if you would.
I have a break.
Yes, there's 15 minutes. And then on bridge, I'll mark you guys of coming, and we'll have the handouts. I'll put them there, but the handouts are also on our website.